San Francisco is finally getting their streets cleaned up, and why is it that this is happening? Well, after years of outright decay, we see that the streets are finally having the homeless people stripped away. We're seeing the feces being removed. We're seeing all of the needles being taken off the streets. We're seeing the streets being cleaned. We're seeing the graffiti being scrubbed away. We're seeing new things being painted. We're seeing architecture being created. And why is that? Is it because they actually care about the morale and the civilian populace that lives within San Francisco? Is it because they care about children having a clean place to walk that is safe so they can get to their bus stop? No, of course not. Otherwise, they would have made sure that it never got to the state that it's in currently. What they do care about is looking good for their leaders. And who's Gavin Newsom want to look good for? Well, he wants to look good for Xi Jinping. And the fact is that California is now hosting a summit coming up in the following days, going to be happening in San Francisco. And because of it, well, it appears that they want to make sure that they have good optics. They don't actually care about the sustainability of the people that live within San Francisco. They're not doing anything to talk about the fact of what's going on with the rising cost of living, the rising fentanyl crisis, the rising homelessness crisis that is tied to the fentanyl crisis, that is tied to the drug wars, the fact of how this is tied to the open borders. No, they don't want to have any of these conversations. They simply care about the optics of looking good for their leaders, because the people who are going to be in the major upper echelon of the delegation class when it comes to the governments of the world will be coming to California soon. And because of that, they're trying to look good. They don't care about you, they just care about themselves. They don't care about making sure that you're doing okay. They just care about fattening their pockets and making sure their wallets get fatter as you are stripped mined of your wealth. They don't care that you're poorer and poorer as the days go on. They don't care that your dollar is diminished in value. Every single cent that is drawn out by the Federal Reserve and strip mined into many of these black budget projects, as well as these wars that the American people do not get to vote on to support, they don't care about any of you. Now let's go ahead and get into the nature of how San Francisco doesn't have to decline, just like many of these modern urban cities don't have to, because if government actually cared about the people that live there, well, as we can see from what's happened recently with San Francisco, they could solve these issues. They just simply. From the Citizen Free Press, San Francisco before and after. For Americans on the left and for Xi on the right. As we can see, for Americans, we have a homelessness crisis, we have a homeless encampment, we have what I would argue would be fentanyl galvanizing the entire city. We would have needles distributed across the entire place. If you have not seen the map image of San Francisco from the app that they created to detect feces on the streets, go look it up. It is the entire city covered in individual slots from people marking the fact of where people have defecated and it now needs to be cleaned up. That is the nature of cultural decay that has been brought on San Francisco, and with it, we can see that they live under an anarcho-tyrannical state, because if they were to try and do anything to stop these people from causing this massive decay, whether it's the shoplifting sprees, whether it's the homelessness crisis, whether it's the people that are just doing drugs out in the open, creating an unsafe environment for children, well, these people that are trying to stop this would be treated like they themselves are the criminals, and they would be prosecuted as if they were the villain of the story. And that, my friends, is anarcho-tyranny. So what do we see here from an S freedom? San Francisco is finally clean, and it only took Xi Jinping to do it. The government can easily fix our cities overnight. It just doesn't want to. And what we see is the reason they don't want to is because they just don't care. It's amazing what our government will do for China, but not for its own citizens. Hey, Dictator Xi, can you please visit Detroit, Baltimore, New York, and Chicago next? On to libs of TikTok. They cleaned up the streets of San Francisco for China's dictator. They can fix this crisis plaguing our cities. They just don't want to because they fucking hate you. Absolutely true. Look at this. We can see that all of these barriers and fences have been erected in San Francisco, which I find funny because I remember Democrats talking about how fences and borders don't actually work to stop anything, and why we don't need walls because they're not actually relevant and they don't stop people from getting through. But if that was the case, why is it that we need all these borders and fences and checkpoints? Oh, because it actually deters people from having freedom of movement. So what we see here, Liberty lockdown with Clint Russell. So when Xi leaves, will they just release 1 million homeless people back into the streets of San Francisco? It's not 1 million, as I've stated, it's 170,000 people. Will the locals accept the needle-infested, shit-covered streets again now that they know it can be cleaned up in a week? Gonna get interesting. And here's another fascinating thing. Will the people who are homeless see how fast the streets were cleaned up and do anything to make sure that they do not allow the consistent decay to happen at the rapid rate with which it was? Or are they just going to fall back into the same patterns? I'm pretty sure they're just going to fall back into the same patterns, because once you're stuck in a certain mindset, it's incredibly hard to escape it. What we see here from Joshua Smith of Break the Cycle, there are no real locals in SF. Locals can't afford to live there and haven't been able to for a long time. The vast majority just travel into from the city, surrounding suburbs for work. The ones who do live there live in high life in the hills, away from all the blights that downtown suffers. And here we can see from the Mises Caucus, privatize the sidewalks and streets. Now on to Mike Cernovich. They literally cleaned up San Francisco for a world dictator, not for their own people. It's hard not to find this extremely funny. And while I can see the nature of why that would be humorous, I do not find it humorous to the fact that children are suffering in a worse condition with which they have to live solely based on the fact that government is nothing more than a tyrannical substructure of nothing more than the largest mafia in existence. Now we see here, we have a clip of Gavin Newsom. He says, here's a video of Gavin Newsom from 2008 promising to end San Francisco's homelessness crisis in 10 years. How's it going, Gavin Newsom? And as we can see, well, it's going pretty poor.
We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness.
If that isn't the most politician shit you've ever heard in your life, that's just the most obvious thing I've ever heard anyone say in my entire life. Let's just replay that.
We believe fundamentally that food solves hunger, that shelters solve sleep, and that housing solves homelessness. And if we're
food solves hunger and housing solves homelessness. No, wow, you don't fucking say, you goddamn fucking moron.
We're going to solve the problem of those that are out on the streets that we define as homeless. We better solve the housing problem if we're going to have an impact. And that's why we established this framework, what we call a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness in San Francisco.
All right, you know what? Actually, just thought about this. I'm going to make a quick comment. It's not that he's a fucking moron. It's that he thinks you're a moron. It's that he thinks you're so stupid that you'll hear, well, food is used to solve hunger, and what we can do is we can use houses to solve homelessness. And that means we can solve homelessness and hunger by giving people food and giving people houses. It's like, yeah, no shit. That's how you literally stop these things. How are you actually going to do it? What are the policies you're going to implement? It doesn't talk about it. It's nothing more than political grandstanding and waving a flag to say, oh, look at me, I care about these people. Which, as we can see, they clearly don't. Now onto this tweet from Monica Crowley. They cleaned up San Francisco in record time because China's president and other world leaders are coming this week. When those leaders leave, they will let the city slide right back into filth and decay. That's how much they hate you. It's absolutely true. Now let's go ahead and jump into this clip from Fox News talking about the fact of how they've been revitalizing the city and making it look anew. It's almost as if there's something happening in the city of San Francisco and they're trying to, I don't know, morally grandstand and act as if they're better than they are. Let's go ahead and jump into this clip.
Yes, that's right. The summit is expected to bring in $53 million, filling hotel rooms, bringing big business. And the city did tidy up for Dreamforce, but this cleanup is much more extensive. While San Francisco is in the spotlight for the Asia-Pacific Economic Conference, city leaders are making sure the city shines.
Tourism is our business here in San Francisco, and we need to focus on making sure that the tourist dollars still come back.
Caltrans repaving major roadways like the Harrison Street off-ramp from the I-80. BART doubling down by deep cleaning their stations overnight more often.
The city had gotten a little bit dingy over time.
Scrubbing and power washing is happening all over the city.
Yeah, the bottom of my shoes look clean.
It's noticeable how clear the streets look and how few homeless encampments there are on major thoroughfares.
Having been a longtime resident in the Bay Area, you just naturally start to wonder if houseless folks being displaced.
Public Works is installing decorative crosswalks in North Beach and Chinatown, and the Webster Street pedestrian bridge in Japantown was recently repainted. The Yerba Buena Gardens at the Moscone Center are decked out with new colorful landscaping and murals, paid for by the Clean California grant, just in time for the 20,000 high-profile CEOs and heads of state coming into town next week. Some people say this should be how it's always done.
What about the people who are here year-round, and local, hardworking, working-class Bay Area folks?
Others welcome the cleanup.
Anything that brings in a positive look on the city of San Francisco is great.
We will continue to do everything we can to maintain cleanliness in our streets.
And city officials are saying that there are no additional funds that are being allocated for beautification. Departments are just using existing budgets. They also say that those budgets are being moved so that they can focus on the areas where APEC is taking place. The summit is expected to start on Wednesday, and of course, people will start coming into town over the weekend and early next week. I'm live in San Francisco. Back to you, Julie.
All right, nothing like a little extra motivation to clean things up. Crystal, thank you.
That one guy stating the fact that the city just looked a little dingy. No, the city had fallen into outright decay, and the fact that you were willing to sidestep the nature of how far it had really fallen from grace only shows why it fell to the state that it did. Well, on to the post-millennial. California cleans up homeless camps in San Francisco just for Xi Jinping's visit. When our community hosts events like APEC, we just want our best foot forward. So that's what they have to say. Not, we want our best foot forward so the children living within San Francisco have the cleanest streets to walk through and play on. It's no, we want to make sure that we look good for the rest of the world. In an effort to conceal its homelessness epidemic during an Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference and Summit that takes place on November 11th through the 17th, the city of San Francisco cleared out its homeless encampments and established night ambassadors to keep them from coming back. President Joe Biden is also expected to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping at this summit. According to the Daily Mail, the summit will be San Francisco's largest gathering of global leaders since 1945 and is expected to bring over 20,000 people and $50 million in revenue. On Wednesday, workers cleared out popular homeless spots, Jesse Alley, where those who stayed with watch crews throw all of their belongings into garbage trucks and hose down the streets. One homeless man told the outlet that the police requested that they stay away from the area while the conference was taking place. The police just told me that there's a major conference and that the president is coming and asked if we stay away for a week, he said. They took everything, my tent, my cell phone. I've got to start all over. I could have cursed them out, but it ain't do me no good, he said after being forced out. Deputy Director of Communications and Legislation of Affairs, Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, Emily Cohen, told KQED, when our community hosts events like this, APEC, we want to put our best foot forward. She added dedicated outreach interventions will be focused on the connectivity and vicinity. Offering safe places for people experiencing homelessness will be a priority. So, people like Gavin Newsoms claiming in that video that we saw that he wants to solve homelessness and that he cares so much about the homeless people. Well, if that was the case, and these people have to start all over now because you've completely thrown every single piece of hardware that they had when it came to their facets that were able to build their life around, like, I don't know, their tents, the cell phone. Why does a homeless person have a cell phone? That's kind of ridiculous. It's realistically just a state-sponsored phone many of the times, and because of that, that is something that the taxpayers are paying for, which is then only incentivizing homelessness, which is routed through the welfare state. Conversation for a different day. Nonetheless, go ahead and read Thomas Sowell talking about the fact of the issues with the welfare state, because one thing that it certainly does is incentivize people to be lazy and not work, and not only that, it incentivizes fatherlessness because it incentivizes women to marry the government rather than the man who is supposed to be the father of their child, because they can receive more money from the government and tied in with child support than they would actually just being a stay-at-home mother or someone who is supported by a husband who is taking care of their child. And with it, because of the nature of the cultural decay, it has led to the state we are in now, where men are looking at women, in the state where they are concerned about actually interacting with them when it comes to the nature of entering a marriage proposal, because they are concerned about the process of losing so many of their assets. I disagree somewhat on the nature of how these arguments are made, but I understand why there's so much concern and speculation around this current institution that we know as marriage. Nonetheless, moving on, what we see is the city offered to take many homeless people to shelters in the area, but many refused. One person told the Daily Mail, "We've got nowhere to go and they're trying to push us to areas we don't want to go." Well, guess what? The people within the city who are taxpayers, which I'm not going to sit here and advocate for paying taxes, but the thing is, the people who are within the city who have children that want to have these children being safe in these areas, well, they don't want you in these places. And the fact is, there's a strong argument for the fact of you being removed from them. And what this reminds me of is Hoppe's physical removal, which if you want to go ahead and read anything about that, go ahead and read Democracy, the God That Failed. You can find a free audiobook or a free ebook online about it. It is in physical text. I believe you would have to order it. It would cost you like $50 to $80. I cannot find an actual copy of it. I've been listening to Jose Galison on the No Way Jose show, along with Toad from the Tower Gang podcast, and they've been doing a reading of Democracy, the God That Failed. It's been quite fantastic. No Way Jose, you can go follow him on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts and stuff. Jose's fantastic. He did a great series on what happened with Terrence Yeeke and the Oklahoma City bombing, going through all the speculative nature of what was going on with all the nefarious shit surrounding that story. Moving on back to the homeless encampments in California. What we see is Gavin Newsom visited China last week as part of a delegation focused on working on climate action and partnership between them and the U.S. San Francisco residents echoed the sentiments that the city is capable of cleaning up the homelessness but chooses not to. Soma resident and community activist Rissi Lee Win told the New York Post they've cleared out the tents that were near the Moscone Center and the Howard Street Center. What we see is they can tell these people within the city that they can leave. They have the capability to do this. Instead, they just do the bare minimum, she added. They are just essentially hurting the problem around but offering no long-term solutions. And that's exactly right. They are not offering long-term solutions because they don't care. They don't care if all of these people walked off a cliff and were thrown into the dustbin of history and no one even remembered their names. They do not give a singular flying fuck about the homelessness crisis. All they care about is that it makes them look bad. Now, I'm going to go ahead and end it there. Thank you for watching if you got this far. Everything I use in all of my videos will be linked in the description down below if you would like to go find the information and the resources that I use. Thank you for watching. Stay lovely, stay great. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Tell someone you love them. Peace out.